Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to our Parsha Insights focusing on the Midrash. Today looking at Parshat Vayeshev, the Parsha that sees the next generation grow up, that sees Joseph go from being the favorite child to into his descent and the dreams that he has. And we'll take a look at what I think is some fascinating Midrashim that deal with some of those episodes. So let's jump right in, and I'll share the screen. Here we go. Okay. So what's happening in the parasha is that Joseph had his dreams. That's the very opening of the parasha. Joseph is despised by his brothers. His father, of course, he's his father's favorite, and then his father does something. It's before this verse, but his father sends him to Shechem. Why? To check on his brothers, to see how the brothers are doing. And many could question the wisdom of this act. Why his father, knowing about the friction that exists between the brothers, and we'll take a look at a very interesting commentary. That's going to be kind of an aside for a moment. That's not going to be the focus of what we're looking at, but a very interesting commentary. And take a look at what Jacob, what the father was thinking in putting his children together in that way. And ultimately, of course, it led to the whole downfall and to going down to Egypt, and the sale of Joseph, which led to that. So Joseph goes to Shechem, and he doesn't find his brothers there. Vayimtsaehu ish. So the verse says he found a man. So thinking, and again, trying to read through the eyes of the Midrash, whenever the Torah says a man, it's not just a man. It's going to be something or someone special. There's something unique happening here. Vayimtsaehu ish. So he found a man, but that's a very loose translation that I'm offering, because Vayimtsaehu really means, and he found him. Vayimtsa means he found. The hu, the pronominal suffix, is that him is the third person. So he found him. Who found who? Did the man find Joseph, or did Joseph find the man? We don't know. Doesn't, and of course, the simple narrative is that Joseph found the man, but just arguing that it could be read differently. V'hinei to'eh basadeh, and he was to'eh, wandering. He was wandering about in the field. Who was wandering? Was it Joseph or was it the man? Again, in the biblical Hebrew, it could go either way. Again, the pshat is that there was a man who was wandering in the field and Joseph found him. But just putting it out there, according to the rules of grammar, it could be either way. Vayishalehu ha'ish lemor. And the man asked him, saying, Ma tavakesh, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? Vayomer, and he said, Joseph said, Et achai anochi mevakesh. I'm looking for my brothers. Hagida nali, tell me please, Efo heim ro'im. Where are they shepherding? Where are they? Here the translation is pasturing. I don't know what that means. Where are they? Where are they? Where are they doing their work? Where are they with my father's flock? Where are they? Vayomer ha'ish. So the man said, Nasumeze, they've left here already. Kishamati omrim nelcha dotaina. I heard them say, we're going to go to Dotan, where he ends up finding them. Vayelech Yosef achar achav. Joseph went after his brothers. Vayimtsaem bedotan, and he found them in Dotan. So what happened here? So the answer is absolutely nothing happened. Joseph's father went to, Jacob said to Joseph, go find your brothers. So what the verse could have said is that Joseph went out and he found his brothers. Right? Why do we have, if it's hard to relate to in the era of GPS, where we don't really need anyone's help to get anywhere, to find anyone. Right? You could just text them, where are you? But putting ourselves back a few years, maybe a decade or so, into an ancient world, and imagine, if I'm driving to someone's house, I would say I left my house and I got to someone else's house? Do I need to tell you that I stopped at the gas station for directions? Remember when we used to do things like that? Do I need to tell you that I asked somebody for directions? No, that's not part of the story. So suddenly this incident, very strangely, becomes a part of the story. That Joseph encountered a man. I'm looking for my brothers. Do you know where they are? Yeah, they were here, but they left and they went to Dotan. Okay. Any thoughts before we start looking at the commentators as to who this man was and what exactly he was doing? Any thoughts or questions that one might have on these three verses? Okay.
Hi, Rabbi. Sorry, I guess I don't know. I usually men like that sometimes are like angels or somebody to give him kind of direction. I don't know. I mean, a man doesn't say anything about him, but
exactly. So you certainly have the midrashic instinct, and oftentimes where it says a man, it will be either Elijah the prophet or an angel, or there will be midrashim that offer those suggestions for sure, and we'll look at those 100%. 100%.
Is this verse, or are these three verses preceded by any hints?
It's a great question. Are these verses preceded by any hints? We could look at the verses. They're very, very simple verses beforehand. Give me just a second and I'll jump into, let's go right into the other window. Okay. Vayesaper. So this is, let's do the English and Hebrew also. It'll be, there we go. So this is still part of the dreams. Verse 10 is part of the dreams, and verse 11 is his brothers were upset at him. Now verse 12, his brothers go to pasture their flock in Shechem. Vayomer Yisrael el Yosef. So Israel says to Joseph, your brothers are pasturing, shepherding in Shechem. Go. And he said, okay, I'll go. And Jacob said, go see the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and let me know. And he sent him from the Emek Hebron, from the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. And then we come to our verse that on the way, when he got to Shechem, he encounters this man. So that's the lead-in.
Yeah, but the lead-in is basically saying, look, there's a lot of tension going on, and there needs to be an intermediary, and the intermediary may or may not be an angel.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're not going to send this guy into a situation where it's one against everyone. There's got to be some sort of mediation going on.
So great. So we're, as we're talking, we're writing a commentary, and let's discuss. So how is he an intermediary? What does he accomplish here? Because this guy just sends Joseph on his way. So what is he accomplishing in these verses?
I just want, if I can just ask, it sounds like somebody's wandering in the fields, and it's Yimsa'ehu, like as you said. So he was found. That's from my Hebrew understanding of Tiktuk. That's what he was found wandering in the field.
Yeah.
He's wandering. It sounds, physically he sounds like he's lost, and maybe spiritually or emotionally or whatever. He, as you said, he hasn't gotten along with his brothers. Maybe he's worried what he's thinking about his future. I don't know. Something is happening. Maybe an angel's coming to tell him that everything's going to be okay in the future. Who knows? But wandering the field sounds like he's quite lost in many senses of the word.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of reading it. The way that I believe Peter and Cheryl are suggesting is that, the guy said, the angel, we'll assume he's an angel, or the man, whatever it is, Ha'ish, how he says to him, what are you looking for? You're wandering. And then he forces Joseph. Sometimes it's those simple questions that force us to really see the most profound truths. What are you looking for? Oh, I'm looking for my brothers. Oh, suddenly he forced him to say, my brothers, not those bastardly guys who have been tormenting me, I'm looking for my brothers. He forces he forces Joseph to articulate those words, my brothers. That's beautiful. Could be. That's a step into reconciliation, is acknowledging the connection. That's very nice.
Yeah.
That's very nice. And we're going to see in a few moments. It didn't come out in the source sheet that we sent out, but I'll play you 60 seconds of a song, because these words, I am looking for my brothers, can you tell me where they are pasturing, became very popular, words to a very popular song, which we'll get to in a moment. Et achai anochi mevakesh. I'm looking for my brother. I love this song. I happen to love it. But we'll look at that in a moment. They see something obviously much different in that, similar to what you were, I think what you were suggesting, which is quite beautiful. The Ibn Ezra in the 12th century, the commentator says, stop all your imagination, stop looking into this too much. There's a plain meaning of the text. It's just a guy who's walking. It's a passerby who found him. Ibn Ezra saying sometimes, a man is just a man. Sometimes a cigar, sometimes it could just be that which it is. It's a man who's walking, and Joseph had a conversation with a man. The Ibn Ezra, okay, a little bit of a killjoy to our Midrash party, but that's okay. And then, but to bring us back to the Midrashic lens, look at Rashi. Rashi says, who is the man? Ze Gavriel. This is the angel Gabriel. How do we know? Why? Because he's called an Ish. In the verse, it says a man, an Ish. And the verse in Daniel says, Ha-Ish Gavriel. It connects the idea of Gavriel to the word Ish. That's what you have to do, is find some type of textual hook to make that. You can't just make it up. It has to be there. So there is that idea of Ish with Gavriel. Isn't that beautiful? So Rashi says it's the angel Gabriel. But there are other comments also. The Rush on the Torah, Asher ben Yechiel, in the 13th century says, Shamati Shehu Rifael. Why Rifael? What's the hook, right? Gavriel has the word Ish associated. What's the hook? You know what this is an abbreviation for? It's not an acronym. It's an abbreviation for gematria. The numerical value. Rifael, which is, let's do that. I didn't do the math beforehand. I decided to save it for real live time. So 200 plus 80 plus 1, 281 plus 30 is 311. And Ish, 1 plus 10 plus 300 is 311. So just know that the word Rifael and Ish, so when it says Ish, it's a hint to Rifael, right? When gematria works, it's beautiful. It's quite elegant. And the Rush says, I wanted to address a question that we asked a little bit earlier. He says, Tema Gedola, it's a great bewilderment. Abby, please. I think Abby has a comment. She's raising her hand. Okay, when you can unmute, please jump right in. Tema Gedola. He says it's a great bewilderment. Yesh ish chacham v'navon. That there's somebody as wise, kamo Yaakov, Avinu, as wise as forefather Jacob. Shalach Yosef hachaviv alav kenafsho. Joseph, who he loved as much as he loved himself, his beloved son Joseph ben Achav, asher mikiram shayu sonimo to sinat mavet. He knew that his brothers hated him. He knew that the brothers despised him, what they call sinat mavet, the hate of death. That they, I don't know what the English phrase might be, but they truly hated Joseph. So why is Jacob sending his favorite son, Joseph, to be with the brothers? V'yesh lomar. Abby's sending me a message. I won't let her unmute, but her question is, wouldn't it have been better not to catch up to them? Why attribute to an angel? Ibn Ezra has a point. Wouldn't it have been better not to catch up? I mean, wouldn't it have saved Joseph if he hadn't caught up? Obviously, none of the story would have unfolded. Why are you giving, the angel is almost an enabler to a story that doesn't end well. I think that's Abby's excellent point. Any thoughts as to why? While I formulate my own thoughts, yeah, Michael.
Maybe that's just the best outcome for Joseph, considering it might have been significantly worse faster.
Yeah, there is that approach, and I think it's a good approach that the story needed to happen, right? That had Joseph not been sold into slavery, this is all part of a prophecy. We know that they're going to go down to Egypt for 400 years. We know it has to happen. What's the best way for it to happen? Maybe this is the way for it to happen. Maybe we could talk therapeutically also about this intervention that's needed and for the reconciliation that happens later in their life. And without this moment of conflict, that reconciliation never happens. I mean, there's a number of different paths to get there to say, it's all for good. Whatever God does, as the Talmud said, Kol Avid Rachmana L'Tav Avid. Whatever God does is for good. And so the angel is kind of making this unfortunate thing happen. That's a great approach, and it could be. But Abby has a point that Ibn Ezra certainly could be saying, somebody else could have done this. You could attribute, just because bad things need to happen, you don't need angels to do them. And maybe that's the Ibn Ezra's point, which is a very good point. Thank you, Abby. So going back to the Russia's question. So why did Jacob send Joseph? Yesh lomar ki Yaakov lo lechinam shalcho. He didn't send him for nothing. He knew what he was doing. But ki amar alo achecha roim b'Shechem. He said, your brothers are pasturing in Shechem. Amar Shechem. He said, the emphasis is on Shechem. Shechem is not a good place. We know what's happened in Shechem already. It's not a happy place for the Jews, or for this at least first family. Makom muchan lepuranutu. It's a place that's ready for retribution. But bad things are going to happen in Shechem. V'iyafshar shum zman shelo yikashlu et mi eshlach, and it's impossible that whoever I send there is not going to be tripped up, is not going to be caught up and ensnared in the evils of Shechem. So I have to, basically what he's saying is, I have to extricate my sons. My children are in Shechem and I have to get them out of Shechem. Who can I send to convince my children to leave Shechem? He said, who are they going to believe so that they're going to leave Shechem? Who are my sons going to believe? If I don't send my beloved son, meaning the fact that I'm sending Yosef to tell them to get out of Shechem, it means that I really believe it. That's what the Rosh is saying, that was Jacob's intention, was to show the other brothers the fact that I know that I'm endangering my beloved son by sending him there means that I really believe in this mission, and get out of Shechem. Okay, that's the Rosh. So far we've seen three interpretations: the Ibn Ezra, who said that the man is just a man; the Rashi, who says that it's the angel Gabriel; and the Rush, who says that it's actually the angel Raphael. Each of them have different meanings. And the Midrash says, look back at the verse. The Midrash is going to ask, what are we looking at? What's the key word? Ish. But wait a second. It says Ish once, it says Ish twice, and it says Ish a third time. The man, the man, the man. So the Midrash says, Midrash Agada vayimtsaehu Ish shlosha malachim nizdavgulo. There were three malachim, means
angels.
It means angels. In this case, it means it's spelled without the aleph, which actually means kings. And I'll tell you, I read this as angels. And Peter, I read it, there are three angels. And then vayimtsaehu ish, hare, one, again, ish. And I'm getting stuck on this word because the way it's spelled without an aleph is from the word melech, which is king, not malach. It's said in a very familiar way, but it's there it is. So let me share the other. Let me show you one of the beauties of Sefaria. Is okay. Let's go to. Okay, here we are. So we were right here, and let's retrace some of these steps just to show you what you can do in this amazing website, Sefaria. So it said Vayishale. We're hold on a second. I can only see half of my screen. So here we go. Vayim Sa'ehu Ish. So let's go to some resources on Sefaria. There's Midrash. There are 9 Midrashim. So I want to look at the Midrash Agadah. This Midrash Agadah. Let me go into the Midrash Agadah. Here we go. This is where the source comes from. Vayim Tzaehu Ish Shlosha Malachim. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, wait a second, 3 kings. Where do we get this idea? So on this Midrash, there is a commentary. Maybe there's hope. Let me open the commentary. Notes and corrections on Midrash Agadah. And in that, it says Malachim with an Aleph. So we are vindicated in our read that it is as it, we read it as it should be, not as it is, but in fact, as it is as it should be. So it's talking about Malachim, angels. Okay, so let's go back to our sources. Okay. Oops.
Rabbi, but if it's supposed to have an aleph, why didn't it have an aleph? I don't understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. The emendation is that over time, some scribe dropped an aleph, but it should be an aleph. It's incorrect. The way it is right here is, again, the modern printing press has, I think, made us forget a lot about, how words come onto the paper, how they arrive in front of us in the book. But these midrashim went through manuscript after manuscript, copied by hand, and finally appear on our screen. But there are some scribal errors that come in along the way, or printing press errors, or something ran out of ink at some point and the aleph didn't get typed, or whatever it is. There are lots of different ways to get to this point where malachim and malachim are confused. The Dad's Kenim has a very creative approach, and he says the word to'eh is going to be instructive for us. It's spelled with 3 letters actually. Tuf, ayin, hey. The vav is always going to be more for pronunciation, but tuf, ayin, hey. And each one, we're going back to gematria. I don't know why we're spending so much time on gematria today, but it's once we're here, it's okay. So he says, Kan Ramazlo Gavriel. So Gabriel, the angel, is telling him what's Gabriel there to do? He's there to give him a prophecy through the word to'eh, through the word wandering. Taf shel galut Mitzrayim. That's the 400 years of the exile of Egypt. That they were in Egypt, but they were supposed to be in Egypt. They ended up being there for 210 years, but they were supposed to be there for 4 years. Ayin, 70, was the Babylonian exile, I guess, in the 6th century before the Common Era, before the rebuilding of the temple. That's the 70 years of the Babylonian exile. And then the 5, that's 5,000. Shel Galut Edom. Of the Edom, that's the current exile, known as the Edomites, the Roman exile. Lasof Hey Alafim, at the end of 5,000 years, Yichle Bimhei Amenu, may it be completed speedily in our days. And he attributes this Mipi Mori Avi, from my father, my teacher, Zichrono Livracha. So that's one final approach. On this is that there's a hint in the word to'eh. I wanted to go back to these words for a moment before we go on to the next portion, the next half. And these words, and again, very beautifully said by you, is that et achai anochi mevakesh, is Joseph refocusing on his mission and maybe a step towards reconciliation. I am looking for my brothers. Can you tell me, where are they? Where are they? It's very beautiful words. And I'll share the song with you, which I find quite beautiful as well. And I'll play it's a 6-minute song. We'll play just the first minute of the song, and I believe the link was in the source sheet, but let me find, here we go. Let's see, is that there? There we go. Okay, I'll play the first minute.
את החיים אנוכי מבקש, הגידה נא לי, איפה הם רואים? את החיים אנוכי מבקש, הגידה נא לי, איפה הם רואים? את החיים אנוכי מבקש, את החיים אנוכי מבקש, את החיים אנוכי מבקש, הגידה נא לי, איפה הם רואים? איך אתה אחי, תמיד אוהב אותך אחי, זה חרוט בעומק של ליבי, אתה יודע.
Okay, we'll leave it right there, but it's a beautiful song by the Israeli songwriter Aaron Razel, and it was performed as well by Mordechai Ben David, one of the great legendary contemporary Hasidic singers, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song. There are lots of great performances of this online, but it's also, I think, a beautiful example of the words of our parasha being expressed in contemporary Jewish culture, Hasidic music. Okay, thank you for allowing me to share that song with you. Okay, I'm looking for my brothers. Where have they gone? Okay, let's go back to our sources. There's one more midrash which I would like to bring to your attention today, which is not a light midrash. It's not an easy midrash in the sense that it deals with a very serious theological and philosophical subject matter, but to know the midrash, we need to look at two verses. The first verse is from Psalms, has nothing to do with our parasha, but the midrash is going to connect it thematically to the parasha. And the verse in the 66th chapter of Psalms, L'chu u're'u, go and see, mifalot Elohim, the works of God. Nora alila al bnei Adam. So the translation here, held in awe by men. Held in awe by men for his acts. Nora alila. So the Hebrew word alila is a pretty complex word because there are a number of different possibilities for a translation. In alila is an action. In alila is also in modern Hebrew, it's used as libel. It could also be used to describe a plot. It's a story. So there's this word that we're going to struggle, and it's also could be used for an accusation. There are a number of different possibilities for this word. Yes, Sorrel? Wait, you're still muted.
About the word Nora, doesn't that mean horrible?
Good question. Nora is it is in modern Hebrew. It could also be horrible, but really etymologically, it's more connected to the word awe. And in English, we do the same thing. Something, awe and awful are the same word. If you think about it, something that's awful doesn't by definition have to be awful. It could just be full of awe. But we've come to use it in a very negative way. In the same way in modern Hebrew, the word Norah, we use that word in our prayers to describe God. Kel Gadol v'Norah. God is full of, we're full of awe, or God invokes awe. But yes, it could come to mean something negative. You're right about that. But here, come and see the acts of God. God's acts are held in awe. So the way that the translation is reading this is that the actions are held in awe by people. But keep in mind, the word also has a negative connotation. And the Midrash, which we're going to see in a moment, actually uses this negative connotation in a very dramatic way. And it says that God's actions can be negative. They can be, I may use the word as circuitous, might be the right word for God's actions. What are we talking? Well, let's take a look, because it's a big thing to say without backing it up. So here's coming back to our parasha, chapter 39. Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and we have the whole story with Potiphar, who's a very important person, and Potiphar and the chief steward brought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him there. Right, this is how he gets down, and everything that happens in Potiphar's home. And keep in mind the temptation by Vayeshev Potiphar and all of the whole story associated with that, which we're not going to go into detail. But basically, the big question that we're asking theologically is, Joseph, what a righteous person. Why is he going through all of this? Why is all of this happening to him? So look at what the Midrash says in a very dramatic way. The Midrash, Tanchuma, says Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and it quotes the verse that we saw in the Psalm, but they translate it differently here. He acts circuitously, right? Very different translation than he is held in awe. Very different translation. And the Hebrew word alilah could mean both. So what do you mean circuitously? Rabbi Yehoshua, the son of Karcha, said, even the fearful experiences, af hanoraot, again, Sorrel, translating the word nora, even the fearful experiences, sha'atam mevi aleinu, that God, you make us experience these bad, ba'alila at mevian, you bring it about circuitously. What is he talking about? What does this mean? Bo ure'eh, come and see. Keshabara hakadosh baruch hu et ha'olam, when God created the world, Miyom harishon bara malach hamavet. On the very first day, God created the angel of death. Does that make sense that God would create the angel of death? What's being implied here? God created the angel of death. Why did God create the angel of death? And help me finish the question. What need was there for the angel of death if what?
Yes.
No humans yet.
If no humans yet, that's step one. And step two is, even once there are humans, the humans haven't sinned. There's no death. Not only is there no human life, but there's also no death to speak of. So why is God creating the angel of death when we haven't sinned yet?
Well,
we could say that God has a plan. God is prepared for what will come.
Right. Exactly. And
He knows what's going.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say that God, in his omnipotent power, knows that man's going to sin.
Yeah, yes. And this is, this is the conflict that we will never solve, and that philosopher is much greater than any of us have tackled for generations, which is, how do you reconcile free will with the notion of preordination? And with God, if God knows everything, God knows what I'm going to do right now. If God knows, thank God, I got two hands right here. Which one am I going to lift up? The right one or the left one? God knows which one. So what difference does my decision make? All the more so, more substantial decisions. What difference does anything I do or decide make if God knows what decision I'm going to make? And this brings us right into that conversation. And yeah,
Rabbi, can I just ask a question?
Yeah,
It
please.
says, sorry, come and see the works of God, and it says he. Who's the he? Because it's not a capital H.
Where do you see that? Sorry.
And Joseph was brought down there. Come and see the works of God. Who's the he? Is it man acts circuitous, or is it who's the he? Is it just a mistake?
I think
Again?
You've caught a typo. Yes.
Okay,
He acts circuitously. Yeah, it's God. You're right. You're
it's
right.
just a typo. Okay, we got a lot of typos in this portion.
In the source sheet. A lot
In the
of-
source. Yeah,
Well, whoever prepared
Mario.
the reprimand.
okay, okay.
I will correct it in the original. And part of just want to add that one of the beautiful things about Safaria, about this website, is that you make your source sheets public. You have the option. And so I'm very hopeful that another rabbi might be giving a Thursday afternoon Parsha Shir a few years from now and scrambling around on a Thursday morning and decide to wander on Safaria and see Shires and he will not notice, he or she, that rabbi will not notice that he is incorrect because it will have been corrected. So thank you for that. Or the
You're
next time I teach this class, next year.
It's the nature of the Safaria translation with the multiple contributors.
Yeah, exactly. It's a crowdsourced.
Right, crowdsourced, yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Adam nivra, the Midrash continues. Adam nivra bashishi, and mankind was created. Adam was created on the sixth day. Va'alila nitlabo, shu hevia et hamita leolam. So I want to ignore the translation for a second because he informed him. Va'alila nitlabo can mean, amongst other things, that basically he was a libel was attributed to him. Shehu hevia tamita leolam. That mankind was the one who brought death to the world. But really, it had been there for 5 days already. So why are we accusing mankind of bringing about something that God had created? And this is not meant, I don't think this is meant as to question God, but really to redeem mankind in a certain way. And then he gives a fascinating mashal, a fascinating parable, which I think you'll enjoy. I think, maybe. I thought it was very interesting. It's a very lively parable. Mashal lema hadavar domeh. What is it analogous to? Lemi shemevakesh legareshet ishto. Somebody wants to divorce their wife. The marriage isn't working out, and he wants to divorce her. The language here, of course, is very patriarchal and very typical of certainly how divorce works in Jewish law. He wishes to divorce his wife. Keshabikesh lelech lebeito. And when he was ready to go home, I don't know if they were separated or not, but he decided he's going to come home maybe from the end of the day. Anyway, he katav get, he wrote the divorce document before even discussing this with the wife. Nichnas leveito v'haget biyado. So he goes into the house holding the get. Mivakesh alila litnola. And he's looking for a plot, a libel. He's looking for some way to justify giving it to her. Amar la, he said to her, Mizgili et hakos she'eshte. Pour for me this the cup that I'm going to drink from. Mazgalo, she poured for him. Kevan shenatal hakos miada, when he took the cup from her hands. Amar la hare zegitech. He said to her, oh, here's the divorce document in return. Amra lo, she said to him, ma pishi, what have I done? Amar la, he said to her, Tzi mi beiti, you have to leave my house. Why? Shemazagli kos pashur, because you have poured for me a cup of lukewarm water. You have poured for me a cup of lukewarm water. Amra lo, she said to him, Kfar hayiti yodea shani atida limzolacha kos pashur. You already knew, Hayite Yodea, you already had this knowledge that I was going to pour you this cup. Shekatavta taget veheveto biyadecha. You had already written the divorce document, so don't blame it on the cup. You knew what was going to happen. Afkach. The same thing happened with God and with mankind. Amar Adam lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Man said before God, Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, Al Shalo Barat Olamcha Kodem Shnei Alafim Shana. You already had the Torah with you. Hold on, 2,000 years. Ilule shit kanta mavet labriot. Had you not already created death for your creations? Hayita kotev bakach. you would have, if you hadn't, let's look at the English translation, if you hadn't previously decreed death for man, you would not have stated it in the Torah. The fact is that you've introduced the threat of death against me in a roundabout way or in a libelous manner, litlot bi et alila, to hang the blame on me. Heve, and that's what the verse says, Nora alila al bnei Adam, a terrible, sorrow, the negative word, an awful alila, an awful libel against humanity. This is the Midrash at one of its most creative. Looking back at the verse, I mean, this is an extraordinary reinterpretation. Remember, we said, Nora alila al bnei Adam, God is held in awe by men for his acts. What a beautiful verse. What a positive verse. And the Midrash comes in and says, no, God is awfully libelous against mankind by blaming us for death when God created death in the first place. Extrapolating this and trying to understand, the relevance to the Parasha, it's the same thing with Joseph. Joseph is, the descent to Egypt. Why is all this happening? Well, there are two reasons. One could say this is happening because we're making it happen, because humanity is making mistake after mistake after mistake, and Jacob is sending his son here, and the brothers are selling him, and so on, and Potiphar is taking him and trying to trick him and trying to entrap him. You could kind of blame it all on that. But there's another perspective here. And Michael, I think we alluded to this at the beginning. The perspective is that God wants it to happen, and that God's putting the angel there in order to orchestrate all of this. And life and religious life is lived within this tension of free will, of what we do matters, of our decisions have implications, and at the same time, knowing that God has a hand in everything that happens to us and with us and for us, the conditions within which we make these choices. And this Midrash, by having this brilliant reinterpretation of the verse in Psalms, God held in awe, or God performing, awful libel against humanity. Either way, the Midrash is giving us a very creative way of existing within this tension and finding support for this approach in the story of Joseph going down to Egypt. Any questions or comments on this? It's a lot to take in. Any questions or comments on this particular Midrash or approach?
So, Rabbi, if we take that approach, does this go all the way back to the 3 generations of dysfunctional patriarchs, which have always been bothersome? Is this part of the divine plan to end up with Joseph being the key man in Egypt? So is that why none learn from the father, none learn from what came before? Isaac doesn't learn from Abraham. It seems like Jacob did not learn at all from his experience with his mother and father. Is that just a divine plan? Is that why we understand that he had to be so dysfunctional and really be responsible for the hatred in many ways of Joseph with his brothers by creating the jealousies and not having learned anything from what happened with Isaac? I'm sorry to bring it up this way, but it's bothered me for so long, for so many years. Every time I read this, it bothers me again. So I don't have an opportunity to bring it up other than at this time. So I'm bringing it up because it's a long-term thing that stuck with me. So I want to see how you treat us.
It's a great question. I think there are a number of ways to focus to look at this. Yes, they do not learn from their mistakes, and there are certain deficiencies which are handed down from generation to generation. In particular, the family dynamics that were there with Abraham. Of course, Abraham himself rejects the house in which he comes from, and how can he be surprised when he has dysfunction in his own home? And then Isaac, and then visits that on Isaac. We don't have to go through the whole story, but why are they not learning from their mistakes is a great question. The other way of looking at it is to look at what's improved over the generations, and not necessarily that it was inevitable that he was going to get down to Egypt, but at the end of the day, this fixes a lot. And there is a positive part of the story, which is that at the end of the story, they're all together in harmony. And they're all around their father's deathbed, which is not necessarily something that Isaac or Abraham enjoyed, but Jacob does enjoy. So something changes along the way for the better, even though they are in Egypt for 400 years, even though, or 210 years at least, but even though the prophecy is upheld, something is improving along the way. It's a very scary thought to think of all of these things as just inevitable because God wants them to happen. And that, I don't know if you were implying that certainly is implied by the Midrashim, that God is making all this happen because God wants it to happen. God gave the prophecy to Abraham that your children will be slaves in a land that doesn't belong to them for 400 years. And therefore, how could it not happen? Is there anything that Joseph could have done to have turned the story around? Is there anything that Jacob could have done? And I don't know the answer to that, but it's a tough question. What this midrash does, to take a step aside for a moment, what this midrash does is it presents a call for Monopoly, a get out of jail free card to all of us, because we were created this way, right? Why is there death in the world? Well, you can point to two things: because Adam and Eve sinned, or because God created death, and it couldn't have been any other way. This is the way we are created. Why do people have failures? Why do people act on their urges and their desires? Well, one thing you could say is because people are weak, or this particular person who sinned is weak. You could say that. You could also say because God created this person with a Yetzer Hara and with this desire. There's nothing about, it is in human nature, but it's part of the human condition. But one could imagine a humanity without sexual desire, for example. One could create a world without that, theoretically, maybe, without that existing. Probably not, but you couldn't create generation after generation. But still, one could imagine a God creating a world without sexual desire, but God created the world with sexual desire. So therefore, if somebody sins with that, whose fault is it? Is it God's, or is it the person? Or is there a shared blame for that? So is this the great redemption of the sinning person? Or is it simply a cute midrash that notices that there seems to be an inconsistency? If the angel of death was created on day one, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So
Let me make a suggestion.
Yeah, please.
I think there are two sets of rules, one for God and one for us. God is beyond time. God is beyond cause and effect. We can't comprehend. So from that set of rules, it's entirely reasonable that everything is foreseen.
Yeah.
For human beings, we can't live that way. We have to hold people responsible and accountable for their actions. So we say that all of that metaphysics may be true, but it doesn't apply to us. We have to act within the framework of choice and responsibility for what we do. So that actually is how I see it. I can't comprehend God's operations, but I think they're beyond, because I think they're beyond, but I know what's my responsibility as a human being.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. And you're right. The whole conflict, the whole issue hinges on our assumption that God experiences the world, or time applies, how we see time applies to God as well. And you're right. There are other ways to see God's experience versus our experience, and there's no conflict, no inconsistency there. Absolutely.
Rabbi, don't we maybe just take the model of the Rambam and Guide to the Perplexed, that we can't understand God in the first place?
Yes, but the Rambam, in the Guide and other places as well, says two things. Remember, there's another side to that. Number one is that we can't understand God. God's ways are beyond us. Number two is that the objective of life is to understand God. So that's Maimonides says both of those. So we have to understand that which is
So
not
the quandaries there.
and if you meditate on that, your brain will explode at a certain point. But that's 100%. Rabbi Hartman would talk about that contradiction all the time. How it says basically in almost back-to-back sentences, you cannot understand God, and the role of the world and the role of the religious life is to understand God.
First, Immanuel Kant dealt with that at great extent and ended up creating a synthesis between liberty and necessity. So it's not purely a Jewish issue.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll close with that. Just to recap for a moment. The man who is not a man, who is the man? He's either a man or he's Gabriel or Raphael, and the deeper meaning in that encounter that Joseph has, which is not just it's either just an encounter or it's something much deeper to refocus him on his mission, and perhaps also to give him a further prophecy as to the exiles that were about to happen. That's number one. And number two, the Midrash Tanchuma, trying to offer a theological and philosophical framework, understanding why Joseph is experiencing all of these bad things. Yosef HaTzadik, why he's experiencing all these difficult things, and part of it is that these things are built into creation, and then the conversation that ensues from that. So we'll leave it with that. Thank you all for joining us for this very spirited session, and we'll see everyone next week. And wishing you a lichtige Chanukah and a Shabbat Shalom, and may we benefit and enjoy the warmth and the light that this moment brings to us.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Chag
Thank you.
Sameach.
Shalom.
Week.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Same time. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Thank you. Thank you all.